We're in the midst of huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, and I'm a partnerships manager here at AllVoices, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today, I'm excited to welcome our next guest, Sarah Anderegg. She is the Manager of Employee Engagement at Pitchbook Data. Sarah, how's your day going?
It's awesome so far. Blue skies here in Seattle, so great. How about you?
I am jealous. It's like it could be a little sunnier for my liking here in Brooklyn, but I can't complain. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you wanted to kick us off by sharing a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns and what did you want to be when you were younger? How did you answer the question? What do you want to be when you grow up?
That's awesome. I love that question. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about my favorite thing today, employee engagement. My pronouns are she, her, and I kind of laugh when you ask that question, what did you want to be when you grow up? For me, I know it's really cheesy, but I really kind of stand by this concept today. When I was little, I never really had like a dream job or a dream profession that I wanted, like an astronaut or a doctor. I honestly always told my teachers and my parents, and I'm even quoted in like my elementary school yearbook, that when I want to grow up, I want to be happy, which sounds really cheesy. And I think I think John Lennon had a quote that was kind of similar to that. And trust me, I was not listening to John Lennon when I was 8 years old, but I just really wanted to be happy, and I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know, where that would be, what I would be doing, but that was just a priority for me. And I think that's why employee engagement really speaks to what I do, because I want employees at the companies to come to work and I want them to be happy. So I think, we spend so much of our lives at work. Why not enjoy it? Why not have fun? Why not be happy?
Oh my God, I love that. I don't think I've ever had anyone answer it in that way before.
It's cheesy, I know.
No, that's okay. I love that you could be quoted back in your early days of just
Yep.
happy. But I think a lot of people are looking for happiness and just some semblance of fulfillment or joy in their careers. And part of that is the employees and the team that you're on, whether that's the whole company or just your individual team. What do you really value in a coworker the most?
I really value collaboration. I think that when you can put two brains is stronger than one, and when you can put those two together, kind of ego aside, to work on a problem, solve a business case, create a solution, I think that there's exponential opportunity for creativity and just kind of cognitive diversity. I don't think that there's one right way to solve a problem, and when you can get together with someone else or a group of other people to like put your brain power to come to one final solution, that's something that I really value. And especially as I've been working from my own home office, it's just really been like my brain trying to solve some of these things. And I sometimes forget that we have things like Slack or Zoom or tools that allow us to collaborate in this work from home setting. And that's something that I've really kind of missed about being in the office, is just kind of rolling my chair over to my coworker and saying like, hey, can I pick your brain for a minute? Can we work together on this project? You bring so much value. How can I leverage some of the skills and the perspectives that you have to help solve this problem together? And I think that's one of the coolest things about working together. Teamwork makes the dream work. Yeah.
Teamwork makes
again,
the dream
cheesy.
work. No, I love it. It's cheesy for a reason. People know it for a reason. And I definitely agree with you that collaboration and just an array of perspectives definitely yields creativity. And over the past year, we've had to get creative with a lot of different things in terms of collaboration, communication, and of course, employee engagement. How have you really shifted the strategies of employee engagement at Pitchbook, and what changes are going to be long lasting past the pandemic and in the future?
Great question. Boy, have things changed in the last year. Oh my gosh. So I've been at Pitchbook for 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. 1 year was fully in person and 1 year was fully remote. So kind of have two different perspectives. And I'd say like creativity and flexibility were the keywords of this last year while working from home. The HR team, the engagement team, and honestly just the company really had to pivot really fast to figure out how to cater to our employees in an environment that literally no one has ever experienced before. So it wasn't like there was a roadmap on how to do employee engagement. So it's not like we kind of knew how to support our employees as the environment or the realities of the pandemic were constantly changing. So, fortunately at Pitchbook, we do have a fail forward mentality, and we do have a lot of support to try new initiatives. And when they don't work, iterate on them, learn from them, and grow. And so a lot of this last year, a lot of this creativity was trial and error. So trying new things, throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what will stick. And I think a lot of it is rooted in our internal customers. How can we help them win? So our employees, what do they need to feel supported? And understanding that from an empathetic perspective was critical. And I think being flexible, the first couple of months of the pandemic, we're like, oh my gosh, what is going on? I have no idea. What can I do to support? So we hosted a mini brain break every single day. So there's one initiative, like a brain break every single day. So like a Where's Waldo, a quiz, a map, something that people could do to take themselves away from their work or away from, this unknown that everyone was focusing on. So that was the first couple of months. Then we realized that Zoom fatigue was a thing. And we're like, how can we get people off of their computers, and let's do some fitness challenges or some movement challenges. How can we capitalize on this walking that everyone's doing? Let's do some contests. And then we realized that, after a few months, even still, like halfway through the pandemic, Pitchbook was hiring, which we're so grateful to have the opportunity to continue to grow the company during such a difficult time. There are lots of new employees at Pitchbook who haven't had the opportunity to meet other people. So then we started changing our focus to team initiatives. How can we support small teams in their employee engagement efforts to introduce employees to each other? So things are constantly changing, and we had to learn really quickly not to get too stuck on, how things used to be or how things were even 2 weeks ago. I think one of the biggest blessings of this pandemic, and something that we've really shifted in terms of our strategy, and something that we'll continue to work on as we look to what life is like post-pandemic, is Pitchbook is a global company. We are headquartered here in Seattle, an office in San Francisco, New York. We have some folks out in Chicago. We have a fairly large office in London, Mumbai, Hong Kong. So we're global. We're across many different time zones. We're a subsidiary of Morningstar. How can we really leverage that to our benefit? And, while working from home, it really gave us the opportunity to pause and shift to think a little bit more globally about our engagement initiatives. How do we lean on our global offices to provide value for everyone? I think naturally a bulk of our internal events stemmed from Seattle. It's where I sit. It's where I'd say probably 2/3 of our employees are. But now that we're on the same playing field and physical location of hosting an event isn't necessarily a factor, we're able to host something that like all three of our major time zones can experience. We're able to get speakers from different countries or different parts of the world, and they can speak to our entire employee base, as opposed to bringing someone into the office and just speaking to Seattle or New York. We record everything now, so that even if you would have been able to not make it in real time, you can watch the recording afterwards. I think that's been really cool, and it's also just allowed us to collaborate more with folks that you wouldn't normally work with on a day-to-day basis. Like, I don't get the opportunity to learn from my London coworkers as often. So bringing in that diversity, bringing in those new perspectives have really been beneficial for our growth and for our initiatives as we plan things like Pride. Last Pride was a really cool opportunity for us to collaborate with Morningstar, and Pitchbook hosted some events and Morningstar hosted some events, and we shared those events with each other just to continue to provide more value. And I think that's something that we will definitely continue as we look to a in-person environment in the near future.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of kind of global work happening and also just like a holistic perspective in terms of employee engagement. And I've heard a lot of folks think about their employees, whether on the people, specifically employee engagement, diversity, equity, inclusion team, really think about the employees as internal customers and thinking about kind of their experience with the company, whether they are working from home, when they're back in the office. And one of the things you mentioned as well in terms of getting creative and the changes of really leading with empathy. We've seen a lot of leaders needing to lead into vulnerability, and especially from a global company, it could seem like the CEO or just like even your manager is just so far removed from where you're sitting in the organization. How have you seen the leaders at Pitchbook really lean into their own vulnerability over this past year as well?
Yeah. I think even before the pandemic, Pitchbook has done a really good job at really making sure that our leaders are available for our employees. We only have 2 physical offices in the actual office, which is where our CEO and our COO sit. So our other VPs are, sitting out with the rest of us. It's kind of like that tabloid thing, like celebrities are just like us, our VPs, they're just like us. I think, especially this last year, though, our leaders have really shown up in ways that I would never really imagine leaders to kind of lean into that vulnerability. As you mentioned, they've, allowed us into their homes. They've showed us their personal lives and shared their struggles, challenges, fears. They have kids sitting on their laps, which I absolutely love. I think that is so cool. Their dogs barking in the back. VPs they're literally just like us. They have the same concerns as us. I think they have really leaned into having the difficult conversations that have come up on a number of different topics over the course of the year. And they haven't shied away or skirted around those conversations, but rather they're showing up. They're letting us know that they're confronting this, unknown with us as a unit, as opposed to leaders that are so far separated from us.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. And it's good to hear that Pitchbook is really thinking about that. And, VP is just like, I think of the, when we were younger and we were in school, it's just like, oh, like teachers live in their own houses and they have a grocery store as well. They need to eat lunch and have a family. They don't just live in this siloed bubble that we think of them in. So I definitely, I appreciate that as well. You mentioned that, there's so many programming going on and just a lot of collaboration happening at Pitchbook. And I know in these conversations, it always comes up in terms of how do you measure success? What are the KPIs that you look at to know that you are doing a good job and employees are actually engaged? And the sense of being engaged, feeling like you belong at the company is sometimes hard to measure outside of the number quantitatively of events that you have or opportunities, resources, etc. How do you really think about measuring a successful strategy, especially as you are testing out new things all the time?
Yeah, I think it is tricky, especially when it comes to employee satisfaction. We run a lot of surveys, and this last year we've really wanted to make sure that we're understanding the needs of employees. So we host bi-weekly surveys just trying to get a pulse on how they're feeling as it pertains to, the pandemic, how they're feeling emotionally, mental health wise, what are their perspectives on coming back to the office, what do they need, what resources could we help provide them. So a big priority for us is really truly understanding the needs. When it comes to initiatives and events, I think you're right. It really is difficult to measure sometimes. You could say landing a spot on, a best place to work. That's always a goal for us. We create event and initiative targets, and we have surveys afterwards. But I think this year has been really hard. As I mentioned, there really are no benchmarks. There really are no metrics for a lot of the things that we're planning. And so whenever I plan a new initiative, I create a proposal, I create a benchmark, a goal, what I would like turnout to be, what I'd like feedback to be, ideal situation, even though sometimes the numbers are made up. And I don't know how many people are going to want to go to, or how many people are going to want to participate in this Where's Waldo contest. I have absolutely no idea, but it would be cool if it was X%.
Yes.
And then afterwards, just using that as a benchmark to determine whether that was something that we should move forward with, or just chalk it up to say la vie, and we tried it and we'll move on to the next one. I think surveys are great. Being mindful of not over surveying, that's always critical. And two, looking at things like turnover, attrition. Again, this year is kind of an anomaly. A lot of things we weren't able to predict. But really having conversations with employees, taking the time out of your day to connect, keep a pulse on what's going on. I think it's easy to feel like you're in a silo when you're working from home.
Right.
But being intentional with, slacking a couple of folks that maybe lead a team, or our new managers, checking in with them, seeing how things are going, having those authentic conversations, leaning into the vulnerability, and making time for that has been critical. And you get little pieces of information about how teams are functioning together. And it might not be a statistic, it might not be a number, but feeling the emotions of what employees are experiencing has been a great way for us to really look at employee engagement kind of holistically.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense, and really having a two-way conversation with employees to say, do you actually like these events that we're doing?
Yeah.
Like, do you feel like you are part of the company? And really, not being afraid to lead into the conversation if the answer is, no, I actually didn't like that event, or just being open to suggestions too. I think creating that trust with employees is really important, especially with new employees. And I think you're right. It can feel like you are definitely in a silo on your own island, especially if you live alone and you're working and there's no clear delineation between when work starts, when it really ends, especially from a global perspective too. I know a lot of my team members are on the West Coast, so they're working different hours than I am. And I'm just like, I can do these things, and it's just your day is stretched longer. But I wanted to ask about kind of burnout and how you think about preventing that on the teams, especially for new hires as well, who are just like, I want to prove my value to the company and why they hired me, and just having that mentality of, you won't see your managers face when they tell you all of these like metrics that you're doing, or, you want to make sure that you're sharing all the things that you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think you can't treat every employee as like one single entity. Especially as Pitchbook is growing and we're bringing in a diversity of talent, the needs are different for every single employee, and we need to ensure that we are supporting those different needs. So an example is, while Pitchbook is a fairly young company, there are a number of parents that are juggling the added responsibility of children, and maybe they're now taking on or adding a hat, and they're now teachers as well.
Yep.
And they have to make sure that the kids eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and a lot going on. And so how can we support these employees? And that might look a little bit different than supporting an employee that is straight out of college. Maybe they're living with their parents, or they're living in a group, or they're living in a house of 7 other young adults working from home for the first time. And so really catering to the unique requests and the needs of the employees, I think, enforces the idea that employee engagement isn't just a blanket initiative or a one-size-fits-all. It really is always changing, and it can look different month to month, person to person. And going back to keeping our internal customers happy, what can we do to ensure that they can win and be the most successful? Going back to that flexibility, that creativity, listening empathetically, this, inviting and creating an environment where feedback is really treat it as a gift.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, how you can proactively prevent burnout.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree. Feedback is 100% a gift. And I know we've talked about this and it's just out there in the universe too, is just because you're not getting any feedback does not mean everything is good and dandy and perfect. So
Yep.
it's always good to have both, the great feedback, the what could be improved on feedback, and just making space to have a conversation around it as well. It's just not an employee talking at you or like you talking at an employee too. There's that mutual sense of,
Two-way street.
yeah. And I think along those lines as well, in terms of employees, like everybody having different needs, people joining the company at different times. You mentioned just in terms of the makeup of the company is just very diverse in terms of background as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about PitchBook's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, and also kind of how the team responded to the anti-racism movement we saw over the past year as well?
Yeah, sure. So big focus for us in this year, especially in light of the anti-racist movement. I think for a lot of companies, this time last year was really a wake-up call. And while DE&I was a big focus for us before the movement, the light that was really shed on the systemic issues caused us to really reevaluate our strategy, to truly understand how we can not only create an equitable environment where current employees themselves feel like they can thrive and show up to work as their true selves, but where we're attracting that talent, and where we're bringing in more diversity where they can see themselves growing and being successful at PitchBook. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach, the current reality of our current employees, but also making sure that we're bringing in diversity. Last year, we really hit pause on a lot of our initiatives and a lot of our programs, to take a look and see, what events are we running? What speakers are we bringing in? Do they look like, X person, or do they look like Y person? And
Right.
where that breakup really is, are they talking about one topic more so than the other topic? We are looking to celebrate different cultures and traditions in a more unique way. I think an example is we celebrated Lunar New Year for the first time this last year, which was really cool, and we brought in some speakers to share a little bit more about what the celebration really is, and they cooked some food for us, which was really cool, just to learn about the makeup of our current employees, who they are, where they come from. We've really been working to invite more perspectives. I think, as a white female, I have my perspective on employee engagement and events, and, what does that look like for someone else who looks different than me, bringing in their perspective into the conversation to help plan initiatives, help plan events, reevaluating what our employee resource group structure is like. That's been a big undertaking for us. We recently hired a DE&I business partner this last month, which we're really, really excited about, and I think that will allow us to continue to grow on this journey. I think with DE&I, it's never going to be perfect. Like, it is something just like your own personal journey, you'll continue to have to learn and work on as the environment changes, just like companies will. So by no means is our strategy perfect, but we're working on figuring out what works for PitchBook and our employees, and how we can really capitalize on them showing up as their true selves.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the first kind of step that it sounds like PitchBook took was auditing what was currently being done. And I know a lot of companies like had employee resource groups, and thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion was top of mind, but really, acknowledging what's working and what's not, and figuring out how to really address kind of the things that are coming up in terms of the system, like you were talking about, and how we can continually improve and make it better. And there's different parts of that in terms of recruitment, celebration, promotion, retention, all of those pieces. So I think that's really great that it sounds like it's a priority at at the company. In your experience, again, another very elusive feeling of being included at a company, but what is really important to have in place in order for employees from different backgrounds, from different experiences, coming in from different companies to feel like they really belong at PitchBook?
I think creating that trust and creating that dialogue, that back and forth, right from the get-go is critical, and that starts at the very very beginning of your journey. So having those conversations with the hiring managers and the recruiters, them being transparent about who is PitchBook, what we have to offer new employees, and what we hope to receive from new employees is critical. And we pride ourselves in a really robust onboarding experience where employees can join PitchBook from a variety of different backgrounds. Also, like having absolutely no experience in the finance industry, and we provide, like for me, for example, I majored and minored in sociology and Spanish. I knew absolutely nothing about finance, and I couldn't really care less about finance when I joined PitchBook, to be honest. Like,
I will go the answer.
I will go on the record saying this. I was like, fintech, I don't know, private markets, I don't know any of this stuff, but I do know people and I love people. So we have a 2-week onboarding experience where you dive into the private markets and you learn about investment bankers, what a merger is, what an acquisition is. You learn all about that stuff because we want to make sure that we're bringing in really, really good talent, really good people. We can teach them the rest. So that's a huge priority for us. You know, when we go through onboarding, we share with new hires all that's available to them, you know, as high level as possible, so we don't like overwhelm them, because there is a lot going on at any given moment. But we really want to nail it home. Like, this is a place where we want you to thrive, whether you want to get involved with our community engagement initiatives, whether you want to join a PitchBook sports team, whether you want to help get more involved in multimedia. Like, there's an avenue for everyone, and we really want to open up the conversation on day one about what that could look like for folks. And then continuing that conversation with their managers. We, you know, we have a program called 7 Geese, a goal setting program that allows us to set personal and professional goals, having those conversations with our managers on a regular basis about what it will take to get to those goals and how we can show up, you know, as our true self. Personal goals can be something like, I want to lead a lunch and learn, and I get to, you know, work with those employees to help them achieve those personal goals, and that's one of my favorite things to do. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I think that definitely answers my question. It sounds like from your answer, it's like being authentic from the start about who PitchBook is, and just seeing where the employee is and talking, and again, having a conversation around where they would like to grow, how they can like really feel like they are a part of the company as well, and creating those opportunities, whether that is leading a lunch and learn or becoming part of different initiatives that are outside of their kind of job function, but are part of the overall PitchBook community as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us not to false advertise as to who we are.
Yeah.
Like, PitchBook might not be for everyone, and that is okay. We really do want to ensure that when you are showing up on day one, you know what you're going to get, you know what the expectations are from us as an organization.
Yeah.
So that you can really hit the ground running on day one. You don't have any questions about, you know, our culture. I mean, maybe a couple of questions are fine, but like you know kind of what you're getting, and then your expectations are exceeded by all that we actually do have to offer after day one.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good way of putting it. And there's these common themes of just being trustworthy from the beginning, being your authentic self as an organization and as an individual too, working at the company, talking to potential employees. There is like a school of thought out there that trust and, you know, building transparency at a company is just a pie in the sky, rosy idea. And, you know, companies can try to attain it, but I don't know if it's ever going to be exactly there. I definitely don't believe that personally, but how do you see a culture of transparency and trust really manifesting in the business itself? If you could provide like an example or just, what your kind of thoughts are on that.
Sure. Well, we have annual goals. We have sales targets that we want to hit, and the company's always been very transparent about where we are at in terms of those goals, from a numbers perspective. This last year, our executive team has really increased communication exponentially throughout the pandemic, and really making time for the conversations that are on employees' minds. There was a point when our CEO and our COO had weekly coffee chats, and they shared updates on the business. People had questions, are we making money? Are we still selling? Like, we don't know what's going on. I think there are also like other very real questions that people had when you're reading the tabloids, hearing about companies laying off hundreds of employees, and that was a fear that many of us had, and thankfully that never happened at Pitchbook. Really grateful for that, but our leaders were having those conversations. They were letting us know where we were at, where our reported COVID numbers were. They wanted to ensure that, the questions that were on our minds that maybe we were too scared to ask were answered. So not only were they were thinking ahead, they were thinking empathetically, but they were upfront about it. And sometimes, every week that was a lot. Sometimes we didn't even have that much to talk about. And Rod and John, our CEO and our CEO, they were just talking, sharing about what they've been up to. And that gives a little bit of, human connectivity. Again, going back to CEOs, VPs, they're just like us. Like, they are people. They have fears, they have wins, they have failures, and being vulnerable and sharing that has been really awesome. And getting to learn a little bit more about who these people are and giving insight into that has been really awesome. And I think it's helped our business grow and helped those of us have the same conversations with our managers. Communication about different things that are going on in the world, like anti-Asian hate crimes. Our communication team has been really upfront about, resources available to employees. That's been huge. Like, this year, there has been so many tragedies. Like, pandemic aside, like, it's been a really, really difficult year for a number of different people.
Right.
And our leadership team and our HR team has really done the best that they could to, like, predict the unpredictable and be there to provide resources, mental health support, whatever capacity that looks like, that, wasn't part of our normal everyday curriculum. Like, we didn't have these weekly coffee chats before the pandemic. We didn't even have them monthly. We had quarterly all hands, which are a blast of a time. Again, going back to that transparency, we'd share numbers, we'd make them fun, but getting that constant communication, the pulse from our leadership team that they knew the things that were on our mind, they're there to answer the questions, and they're making the time, they're making it a priority, was huge for us.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that everybody is navigating new waters, and we're in this new time period where employees, potential employees, and folks are just expecting more from their organization. The company is investing more resources in true employee engagement, in community, and really retaining folks in a new way. But of course, like, you're going to make mistakes when you're doing something new for the first time, and really acknowledging it, owning it, moving on, doing better, all of that good stuff. More broadly, this doesn't have to be PitchBook specific, anything you've seen in kind of the news or other like strategies, case studies, etc. Are there any mistakes you've seen in terms of folks trying to initiate a new employee engagement strategy, but it really just falling flat?
Truthfully, I'm guilty of this sometimes, but I think trying to do too much is maybe a common mistake in employee engagement, wanting to make sure that you do a couple of things really right and they do have that impact, and goes back to the KPIs. What does success look like? Sometimes, like this past year, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, oh, I just need to do everything and try and help. And that's not always helpful. Like, oh, I did this, on to the next one. Oh, this didn't work, on to the next one. But actually, like, taking time to pause and figure out like what worked and what didn't work. I think that's kind of a common mistake. And then two, just being too attached to the way things used to be. You know, the work environment is changing and it will continue to change, probably.
With or without us.
Yeah, exactly. And so not being stuck on, oh, this is how we used to do it, but sitting and evaluating, thinking, why did we used to do it this way? Is it serving us anymore? Is this something that helps our employees succeed? Well, actually, it's probably not. So how can we reallocate our resources, our funds, our time to make more of an impact? So traditions, I think, are really big at Pitchbook, and sometimes it's time to move on from traditions, and you're able to say, like, this was something we used to do, and it was really fun, and there are employees that have been at the company that can speak to that and share that perspective, and this is what we do now. This is how we're growing with the company. We're no longer a 200-person company. We're 1,000 people in all over the world. So being flexible, learning how to grow strategy with the company, I think it's critical.
Yeah, I think that's the same in terms of, you could parallel it to the product of a company as well, or the service.
Definitely.
Too. When you have 10 like external customers as well instead of internal customers, it's going to be different than 1,000, and you have to grow and scale and iterate and innovate. And you could love the traditions that you had when you were really, really small and nimble, but there are other considerations that need to impact the strategy moving forward. So I definitely agree that, and have seen that also play out over this past year as well. I guess looking towards the future, is there a trend that you see either individuals or companies really needing to hone in on in order to be successful in the future?
Yeah, I think that, it's kind of becoming a little bit less about ping pong tables and happy hours. Like, those are, don't get me wrong, like, I love those. Those are fun. But especially as many organizations are moving towards maybe a more hybrid work model, really thinking about, like, the head and the heart of employees, really connecting and creating an environment where they can show up as their true selves. Something that I personally find to be really important at an organization is community and philanthropy initiatives. I think they're a critical part of an engagement strategy and just a general corporate culture. Especially while we're working from home, employees want to know that they're making a difference in the world, and that transcends any working location, whether you're in office or from home. But they want to know that how they spend their time is making a difference for a community that might be important to them. So I think really looking at employee engagement as something that is not just inside the walls of the company that you work for, but also in the communities that you serve, and the communities that make up your employee base too. So learning how to support that outside of your organization is, I think, either current or in a future state.
Yeah, no, I love that. I definitely think that's something that's important to me when I'm looking at organizations in terms of a place to work, and also just partnerships between organizations too. So I definitely appreciate that trend. I feel like time has flown by, and we've talked about an array of different topics from your experience, PitchBook, and just what you're seeing in the industry. But is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners, or a key takeaway you want to reemphasize before we kind of depart?
Gosh, I wish I had something.
That's okay. We covered a lot.
This is a hard question. I, I think like if I can nail anything on the head, it's don't look at employee engagement or HR as like a one-stop shop, a one-size-fits-all initiative. Like it is critical with the diversity of employees that are coming into organizations to really treat the strategy diversely, and really treat employees as individuals, not as like a group of X, Y, or Z, but taking the time to get to know people at an individual level really is the key to success and the key to their hearts and the key to the sense of belonging. So if I could make any recommendation, it's really just if you're at any level of the organization, take the time to make relationships, take the time to make connections, create initiatives that foster that, because at the end of the day, like, human connectivity is something that we all want. It's human nature. So no matter where you're working, what you're doing, who you're working with, relationship building, I think, is kind of the foundation for what success and happiness looks like in an organization.
Yes, bringing it full circle to being happy
Woo!
at work.
Yes.
And really, it's a moving goal. So just because you achieved it one day does not mean you stop working on it throughout the rest of the time. And employees are different. So meeting
Yeah.
folks where they are.
The
Sarah,
rest of your life.
thank you
Yeah.
so much for speaking with me this afternoon. I really enjoyed it, and I feel like I definitely was taking some mental notes in terms of just things to take away from as I continue to be in this space as well.
This was awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I love what you're doing, and I'm excited to tune into some of your other episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. We will speak soon. And as a reminder for our listeners, AllVoices believes in the power of all employees to speak up and think it's a necessity in order for folks to succeed across the organization. And I will see you later.